Before we begin, if you want to see more real-life horror, mysterious, and spine-chilling stories like this, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so that every new video comes straight to your phone. Now, let's dive into today's terrifying story.
I never believed the stories about the Silent Ridge until the night I first set foot on its desolate slopes. Everyone in the small Arizona town of Red Rock warned me, though no one would say exactly why. They muttered phrases like, "The mountain doesn't like visitors," or "People go in, and they don't come back the same," but whenever I asked for details, the words would die in their throats, their eyes darting to the horizon where the jagged ridge cut through the desert sky like a serrated blade. I was a freelance journalist, traveling across the country for strange stories, and the ridge's reputation had been circulating on forums and obscure news snippets for years. Missing hikers, sudden disappearances, unexplained phenomena, all centered around this lonely, sun-baked spine of rock. It had become my obsession, not out of thrill-seeking, but a compulsion to understand something that no one dared to explore. I rented a dusty pickup from a gas station on the outskirts of Red Rock and drove the 20 miles that separated the town from the base of the ridge. The desert was quiet, almost unnervingly so, with only the occasional coyote's distant howl slicing through the stillness. The road became rougher as I approached, the asphalt giving way to a rocky, uneven trail that twisted upward. Signs of previous visitors were scarce, a few faded tire tracks, remnants of a campfire, and some discarded bottles. But what unsettled me the most was the feeling in the air, a dense, cloying heaviness that seemed to press down on my chest the closer I got. When I finally parked at the designated trailhead, the sun was setting, casting the ridge in an otherworldly glow, sharp shadows stretching like skeletal fingers across the desert floor. I grabbed my backpack, my camera, and a flashlight, knowing full well that I might be spending the night. The climb began smoothly, almost deceptively so, the sand crunching under my boots and the wind whispering through the cacti. I kept glancing at my GPS, though it seemed almost redundant. The trail had no markers, yet I could follow it. As I ascended, the temperature dropped rapidly, far quicker than the altitude should have caused. It was as if the ridge itself exhaled a cold, invisible breath. Then I heard it, a low, almost imperceptible murmur, like dozens of voices speaking at once, just beneath the threshold of hearing. I stopped, trying to pinpoint the source. The sound was irregular, shifting, impossible to locate. The hairs on my neck stood on end, but I told myself it was the wind, or perhaps the acoustics of the canyon walls amplifying distant echoes. I pressed on. Hours passed. The moon rose over the ridge, casting a pale, eerie light across the jagged rocks. That's when I saw the first figure, a man, or what looked like one, standing perfectly still near the edge of a cliff, his face obscured by shadows. At first, I thought he was a fellow hiker, but as I called out, my voice swallowed in the cold night air, he did not move or respond. I inched closer, and when I shone my flashlight, he vanished. Just like that, as if the mountain had swallowed him whole. My heart pounded, but a mixture of fear and curiosity pushed me onward. I set up a temporary camp in a shallow hollow near the ridge, trying to convince myself that what I had seen was a trick of the moonlight and shadows. The night was restless. Around 2 a.m., I was woken by a scraping sound, slow and deliberate, coming from just outside my tent. My flashlight flicked on, illuminating nothing but rocks and sparse desert scrub. Then I saw the footprints, not human, not animal, but something that looked like a cross between both, pressed into the sand around my camp. The prints circled me, stopping just short of the tent, and then they were gone. No tracks leading away, no signs of movement. I was trembling, heart hammering, but sleep was impossible. By dawn, I packed quickly and continued upward, determined to reach the ridge's peak. That's when the mountain revealed its true nature. The rocks themselves seemed alive, shifting subtly as if rearranging to block my path. Small stones slid underfoot in impossible ways, rolling uphill before settling, defying gravity. The whispering returned, louder now, more insistent, as though the mountain itself was speaking in a language I couldn't understand. And then I saw them, dozens of figures perched on rocks, crouched in shadows, moving with unnatural fluidity. Their forms were humanoid but twisted, elongated, some with multiple limbs, others with eyes that reflected the moonlight like burning coals. They watched me silently, a sea of grotesque silhouettes, but whenever I tried to approach, they melted into the rocks, leaving only the echo of a hiss or a low laugh that vibrated deep in my chest. Panic set in. My rational mind screamed to leave, but every step I took upward felt like sinking into quicksand. The ridge seemed to stretch endlessly, defying maps and GPS signals. The sun rose fully, burning away the misty night, but the mountain remained a maze of shadows and shapes that shouldn't exist. That's when I heard it, a voice, singular and piercing, emanating from nowhere and everywhere. It spoke my name, not in words but in a sensation, curling around my spine and squeezing. "You shouldn't be here," it said. I dropped to my knees, gasping. The mountain was alive in ways I had never imagined. Every rock, every crevice, every gust of wind carried consciousness, malevolent and ancient. And then I saw them again, clearer this time. The beings were not merely hiding, they were constructing something, a circle of stones that hummed with dark energy, growing taller and denser the longer I watched. I felt my own reflection in their eyes and realized with horror that they were aware of me, feeding off my fear, learning from every heartbeat that my camera fell, and I didn't care. I tried to backtrack, but the path I had taken no longer existed. I was trapped in a living nightmare. Hours, maybe days, passed, I can't be sure. Time itself warped on the silent ridge. The sun and moon cycled unpredictably, casting light and shadow in ways that made no sense. My mind frayed as I stumbled through the ever-changing landscape, hearing whispers that weren't mine, seeing shapes that mimicked loved ones, friends, even strangers who had gone missing in the area. I screamed, but the sound bounced back at me altered, distorted, carrying malice. At some point, I encountered a shallow crevice filled with black water. It reflected not the sky, but images of the beings, visions of torment and death, hundreds of years of lost souls trapped in their gaze. I tried to look away, but the reflection gripped me, pulling me in with icy tendrils. My body went numb, and I understood that the mountain did not merely reject humans, it assimilated them, folding them into its will, twisting reality around anyone who dared step on its slopes. I don't know how long I walked, running on sheer instinct. I found an outcropping where the wind howled, carrying the scent of dry earth and burnt hair, and for a brief moment, the beings paused, watching from a distance as if amused. That was my chance. I ran down what seemed like an impossible path, rocks sliding beneath my boots as though trying to grab me. When I finally emerged into the desert plain, sunlight blinded me. I collapsed, shaking, unable to speak, and when the locals found me hours later, I could barely form sentences. The ridge loomed behind me, silent and patient, as though mocking the frailty of human flesh. I left Red Rock that day, vowing never to return, but I know the ridge remembers me. Sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I hear whispers curling around my skull, urging me to go back, promising that I am still part of its history. I've told this story to few, knowing skepticism would be my only companion, but the truth is far worse than words can capture. The silent ridge does not forgive, it does not forget, and it is very much alive. Those who have walked its slopes either never return or return changed, shadows of themselves, haunted until the end of their days. And I, though I survived, carry the memory in every step, every heartbeat, every breath, knowing that one day, inevitably, the mountain will call again, and when it does, it will not let me go. After escaping the ridge that first night, I thought I had left its horrors behind, but Arizona has a way of keeping secrets buried just beneath the red earth, and the ridge was patient. Back in Tucson, I tried to reintegrate myself into normal life, but nothing felt normal. The sunlight seemed sharper, the desert air heavier, and every sound at night, the creak of floorboards, the hum of a refrigerator, carried whispers that reminded me of the ridge. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat properly. Friends and family noticed the change, my hands trembled, my eyes darted constantly, and I became obsessed with researching the ridge, trying to understand what I had seen. The local library and historical archives offered fragments, settlers' journals hinting at disappearances, Native American oral histories warning of a cursed spine of stone, and decades-old newspaper clippings about hikers who vanished without a trace. Each story was eerily similar, people entering the ridge and never returning the same, sometimes never returning at all. Unable to resist, I returned months later, this time better prepared. I rented a larger 4x4, stocked it with supplies, cameras, audio recorders, and night vision equipment. This time I brought a small team, 2 geologists, both skeptical but curious, and an amateur paranormal investigator who insisted she could communicate with entities. We approached the ridge at sunset, the jagged peaks outlined against a blood-red sky. The desert seemed to recognize me, the wind whispered my name, though I told myself it was imagination. As we began our ascent, my companions felt the unease almost immediately. The geologists complained about the inexplicable drop in temperature, while the investigator claimed she felt eyes upon her soul. We set up base camp near a familiar hollow where I had first witnessed the shifting rocks. That night, the ridge revealed a new horror. Shadows moved independently of light sources, curling around rocks and cacti. Like living smoke. Our cameras caught glimpses of figures in periphery, but whenever we turned to look, nothing was there. Whispers began to rise in intensity, a chorus of voices speaking just beyond comprehension. My team tried to rationalize, wind in canyons, shifting sand, but every instinct screamed that this was more than natural. Around midnight, our instruments went haywire. Compass needles spun wildly, GPS devices fluctuated between coordinates that didn't exist, and temperature gauges plummeted and rose erratically. Then, the first disappearance occurred. The paranormal investigator, wandering near a cliff to set up her equipment, was gone in an instant. One moment she was adjusting cameras, the next, only her hat remained, perched on a stone. We screamed her name, rushed toward the spot, but the ground was untouched, save for sand disturbed in unnatural, spiraling patterns. Panic gripped us. The geologists insisted we leave immediately, but I knew leaving was not so simple. The ridge had become a labyrinth, paths shifting as if alive. We moved cautiously, but every step seemed to take us deeper into the mountain's grip. That's when I saw them again, the figures from before, humanoid but grotesque, watching from ledges, their elongated forms blending with rock. They didn't move, yet their presence pressed on us like physical weight. One of the geologists, a man named Derek, screamed when he saw a shadow detach from a boulder and extend a limb toward him, not touching, but enough to make him stagger backward, blood draining from his face. We huddled together, trying to retrace our path to base camp, but the terrain had changed. Cliffs rose where paths had existed, rocks formed barriers where open ground had been moments before. Time felt fractured. Minutes stretched into hours. When we finally stumbled upon a shallow cave, it wasn't dark, it glowed faintly from an unseen light source. Inside, walls were etched with carvings, symbols that pulsed and writhed like living things, depicting creatures and humans intertwined, consumed, twisted. I realized with a cold dread that the ridge recorded its history, marking those it had absorbed into its strange ecosystem. While examining the carvings, we noticed movement in the shadows. Figures emerged, not attacking, but observing, their eyes gleaming with unnatural intelligence. One approached, humanoid, yet distorted, limbs too long, head too narrow, skin reflective like polished stone. It spoke, not in words, but in a sensation, embedding itself in our minds, forcing images of endless pain, countless victims, the ridge feeding on human fear and confusion. We fled deeper into the cave system, discovering tunnels that seemed impossibly long, descending into darkness that should not exist. The air was thick, heavy, almost viscous, making it difficult to breathe. Whispers turned into wails, screams layered on top of each other, echoing from corridors we could not see the ends of. Derek stumbled, screaming about shadows crawling beneath the walls, moving independently. I held him as best as I could, but the tunnel seemed to stretch infinitely, a labyrinth of living stone. Then the ridge revealed another terror, hallucinations of the past. We saw loved ones, people we had lost, recreated in hyper-realistic detail. They called us, beckoned us, promised safety or understanding. When we reached for them, they dissolved into smoke, leaving only the echo of our own screams. We realized the ridge was not merely rejecting humans, it was rewriting reality around them, testing fear, manipulating perception, folding space and time to trap intruders. Our instruments failed entirely, even cameras and recorders captured nothing coherent. Hours, days, maybe longer passed. I lost track. Exhaustion, fear, and reality blurred. The ridge's whispers became a chorus chanting our names, mocking our mortality. Then, the investigator reappeared. No one had seen her, but she emerged from a side passage, eyes glazed, speaking in a voice not her own, warning that leaving the ridge alive required surrender, not to death, but to understanding its rules. She spoke of respect, of boundaries, of invisible laws ancient as the rock itself. We followed her through twisting tunnels, finally emerging at a plateau with a view of the desert stretching endlessly below. It was daylight, yet the sun felt dim, distant. The ridge remained silent, but its presence was palpable, a breathing, patient intelligence. As we descended, the shadows receded, yet we could still hear whispers in the wind, following us. We emerged into the desert plain, sun scorching, limbs aching, minds frayed. We counted ourselves lucky, others had not survived. But even as we returned to Tucson, the ridge's influence lingered. Dreams were haunted by its forms. Peripheral shadows moved where none existed. And at night, I sometimes feel its cold breath on my neck, reminding me that the silent ridge of Arizona had not forgotten, and that one day, it would call again, and when it did, we might not escape. I had documented everything, cameras, audio, notes, sketches, yet no one could believe the full truth. Those who knew the ridge whispered warnings, but many dismissed us as hallucinating from exhaustion. I know better. I walked its paths. I felt its consciousness, saw its eyes in every shadow. The mountain does not forgive, does not allow intrusion, and will not let go. Those who survive carry its mark, a constant awareness that the silent ridge watches, waits, and remembers every heartbeat of those who trespass. And I, the one who walked its slopes twice, carry the knowledge that the ridge is patient, cunning, and eternal, waiting for the next human to stumble into its embrace, the next curious soul to be consumed by the mountain that rejects humans, the silent ridge of Arizona. After my second harrowing encounter with the silent ridge, I swore I would never return, yet a strange compulsion lingered, pulling me back toward its jagged peaks, as if the mountain itself had claimed a fragment of my soul. Months passed, but sleep offered no respite. Nightmares replayed every shadow, every whisper, every grotesque form I had seen. Friends begged me to stop my obsession, to leave the ridge alone, but I could not. There were unanswered questions, pieces of the puzzle that demanded confrontation. I recruited a new team, 3 experienced hikers who were thrill seekers, 2 historians familiar with native Arizona legends, and an audiovisual specialist to document everything. They were skeptical, but their curiosity mirrored my own, a dangerous combination. We drove through the desert to the ridge at dusk, the red rocks glowing ominously in the setting sun. As we approached, the temperature dropped, a sudden chill that had no explanation. The wind carried distant sounds, faint but distinct, laughter, whispers, footsteps where none could be. Our SUV engine sputtered as if resisting the path, but we pressed on, following the winding dirt roads that seemed to stretch endlessly. As night fell, we set up camp at the base of the ridge. My companions felt it immediately, an oppressive weight pressing down on us. Shadows moved against the canyon walls, distorting in impossible angles. The audio specialist recorded static-filled whispers, a chorus of voices speaking a language older than any living memory. We prepared to ascend. Every step higher brought a sense of wrongness, a psychic resistance. Rock seemed to shift subtly, creating paths where none had existed, closing off others. The ridge was alive, aware of us. By midnight, we had reached a plateau where the wind howled through jagged rock spires. The historians whispered tales of spirit guardians and ancient curses, referencing native legends warning against human intrusion. But we were already too deep. That's when the first encounter of the night occurred. A figure emerged from the darkness, humanoid but distorted, limbs elongated, face unreadable, eyes like polished obsidian. It did not move aggressively, but its presence pressed on our minds, a weight that made thought and speech impossible. The hikers panicked, some screaming, others frozen in place. The figure vanished, leaving only the echo of its presence in the wind. We pressed on, documenting every anomaly. The audio specialist's recorder picked up frequencies beyond human hearing, pulsating tones that seemed to influence our emotions, fear, doubt, despair, all intensifying with each step. In a narrow canyon, we discovered markings on the walls, freshly carved symbols that seemed to writhe when observed. They depicted humans trapped, merged with the rock, screaming faces frozen in stone. The ridge recorded its victims, its history literally etched into its body. As we navigated deeper, reality warped. Paths doubled back impossibly, cliffs appeared where none had existed, and the stars overhead shifted unnaturally. The ridge rejected our presence, but it also tested us. One hiker, obsessed with photographing every anomaly, disappeared in an instant while adjusting his camera. 1 second he was there, the next, only his scream echoed before fading into the wind. Panic set in. We attempted to retreat, but the mountain had changed around us. Canyons twisted, slopes became walls, and shadows moved independently of any light source. Another figure appeared, this one closer, taller, with reflective skin like obsidian glass. It communicated directly into our minds, showing visions of past intruders consumed by the ridge, their fear feeding its power. I realized then that the silent ridge was not just rejecting humans, it was interacting with their deepest fears, using them as nourishment. The historians attempted to reason with it, chanting protective prayers, invoking spirits, but their voices were swallowed, twisted into distorted echoes. The ridge responded not with violence, but with manipulation. Time fractured. Moments stretched into hours, hours into something else. Hunger, thirst, and exhaustion became irrelevant as the ridge fed on our minds, our memories, our sanity. We stumbled into a cavern where faint light emanated from crystalline formations. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with an electric charge that made our hair stand on end. Shadows pooled along the walls, moving against gravity. Our instruments recorded phenomena that could not exist, temperatures below freezing in one corner, searing heat in another, whispers speaking directly to each of us in voices of our past, calling us to sins and regrets. One hiker went insane, clawing at the walls as if the stone itself was alive, trying to swallow him. I barely restrained him, but the ridge seemed to react, pulsing with a presence that was both benevolent and cruel. Then, a vision, a hallway stretching beyond comprehension, lined with the faces of those who had disappeared in previous decades. Their eyes followed us, accusing, pleading, warning. Some whispered, others screamed. The ridge forced us to confront every human fear, death, isolation, betrayal, insanity, simultaneously. My own mind fractured, memories from childhood mingling with impossible visions of alternate realities, timelines where the ridge had always existed, always watched, always fed. The audio-visual specialist's equipment malfunctioned completely, capturing only static and occasional, distorted faces. One historian collapsed, mumbling in an unknown language, tracing symbols into the sand as if compelled by the mountain itself. In that moment, I understood that the ridge's rejection was a form of judgment. It did not simply expel humans, it tested them, measured their fears, and sometimes consumed them if they faltered. Exhausted and terrified, we stumbled upon a narrow ledge overlooking the desert plains. The stars were dim, distant, as if the ridge had removed them from the sky. Below, the desert stretched endlessly, silent, indifferent. We were given a moment of reprieve, but it was only temporary. Shadows moved behind us, creeping along the ledge with intent. We could feel them, aware we were alive, aware we were intruding. One by one, my companions succumbed to hallucinations, visions of their families, their pasts, their sins, all manipulating them, driving some to flee blindly into the night, others to collapse. I clung to the audio specialist, trying to anchor myself in reality, but the mountain's influence was relentless. Eventually, I understood the only way to survive was not confrontation, but obedience, humility, and respect. The ridge did not attack, it corrected, it guided, it tested. We retraced our steps, following instincts over reason, navigating by memory and emotion rather than sight or instruments. The climb back down took hours, though it could have been days. Time inside the ridge seemed non-linear. Finally, we reached the base, breathless, sun rising over the desert. The ridge stood silent, its jagged peaks indifferent, almost satisfied. We were not free of it entirely, shadows lingered at the edge of vision, whispers haunted our dreams, and a deep, unshakable knowledge remained that we had entered a place older and far more intelligent than any human. The silent ridge of Arizona does not simply reject humans, it challenges them, warps their perceptions, and allows them to leave only if they can endure its judgment. Those who survive carry its mark, an awareness of the mountain's patient, sentient existence, a lingering paranoia, and a memory of horrors too vast to fully comprehend. I document this now, warning anyone who may hear, the silent ridge is not a mere geological formation. It is an entity, a living intelligence intertwined with the land, ancient and patient. Respect it, fear it, but above all, do not tread its slopes unprepared. To enter is to gamble with your mind, your sanity, and perhaps your very soul. And as I write, I can feel it watching still, from the jagged horizon of Arizona, knowing, waiting, patient, eternal, the mountain that rejects humans, the silent ridge, alive in shadow, stone, and memory. The descent from the silent ridge had left my body exhausted but my mind in turmoil. Even though we had survived, each step down the desert slope felt like we were carrying an invisible weight, something left behind by the mountain that refused to release us. The sunrise cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to move against the wind, reminding us that the ridge had not yet finished its influence. My team was fractured, some silent, others muttering under their breath about visions, voices, and things they had seen that could not be real. The historian who had been tracing symbols into the sand refused to speak, his eyes hollow yet flickering with memories no one else could understand. The audiovisual specialist's equipment had recorded nothing but static, yet even in that static, we could sense patterns, faces, voices, shapes, that defied explanation. None of us trusted our own memories anymore. In the days that followed, I documented everything, trying to make sense of what had happened, trying to convince myself it was all hallucination, psychosis induced by fear. But there were undeniable truths, the ridge's sentience, the distorted topography, the whispers, the shadows that refused to remain shadows, the way time had fractured and bent like a broken reflection. Attempts to revisit the ridge were futile. I tried once, alone, to return, thinking I had left something behind, some unresolved mystery calling me back. The road led me to its base, but the landscape had changed. Trails that were familiar were gone, cliffs were where flat plains should have been, rock formations shifted subtly, as though the mountain was rearranging itself to remain unknowable. I could feel it watching, waiting, its consciousness pressing against mine. I stopped and turned back. Some things are not meant to be pursued twice. Friends and family noticed subtle changes in me over the weeks. Sleep was elusive. Dreams of the ridge haunted me, vivid and unrelenting. Faces of the lost hikers. We had seen, along with figures I had never met, appeared, screaming in silence, their eyes full of despair. The line between reality and nightmare blurred. I discovered something else. The ridge did not only manipulate those who entered its domain, it influenced thoughts and actions at a distance. Decisions I had made suddenly seemed less my own. Ideas, obsessions, fears I had never entertained emerged with unnatural force, all tied to the ridge, as if it could reach through miles of desert and touch our minds. Researchers who had studied the region dismissed my accounts as folklore or exaggeration, but I knew the truth. The silent ridge was not a mountain to be catalogued or measured. It was a living, thinking entity, older than any record, existing outside human comprehension. One night, weeks later, I received a cryptic email from the audiovisual specialist. It was only static at first, but slowly, hidden within the white noise, were phrases in a voice I recognized instantly, the ridge speaking directly, calling my name, recounting every memory of our trespass. The specialists and historians had all been affected, even remotely, their dreams invaded, their sanity tested. It was subtle at first, a whisper on the wind, a shadow in a peripheral glance, a chill where no breeze existed. But the presence was undeniable. Attempts to communicate further were futile. It was an intelligence without form or language that obeyed no rules. Months passed, and the ridge continued to assert itself in my life. Equipment malfunctioned around me inexplicably, voices could be heard faintly when no one else was present, shadows flickered with awareness, not randomness. It was as if the mountain had imprinted its awareness on me, a permanent mark, a reminder that I had been chosen, or condemned, to witness its dominion. I began to research the ridge's history, consulting both modern records and oral histories from nearby native communities. Stories aligned, disappearances, inexplicable events, phenomena that could not be attributed to natural causes. Each report reinforced the conclusion: the silent ridge was an ancient, conscious being, capable of manipulating space, time, and perception to maintain its dominance and protect its isolation. One historian explained that mountains in some indigenous beliefs were seen as guardians, sentient and protective, but the ridge was something more than guardian. It was predator, judge, and sentinel, all in one. Attempts to study it scientifically were doomed, as the mountain itself resisted intrusion, bending instruments, warping perception, and feeding on the observer's fear. I documented every anomaly I could, preparing a detailed record. The ridge, I realized, fed not only on fear but also on curiosity. Those who sought it out, whether for study, adventure, or spectacle, provided sustenance in the form of obsession, panic, and awe. I myself had been nourished by it, and yet terrified. The more I remembered, the more I understood: no one who enters fully returns unchanged. Survivors carry a fragment of the ridge's consciousness with them, a constant whisper in the mind, a shadow across the soul. The local desert towns have learned to respect the ridge, speaking of it only in whispers, warning travelers and hikers against venturing too close. Legends of vanishing hikers, spectral lights along the cliffs, and voices carried by the wind are real, and they are warnings, not tales. For those who remain curious, I advise caution. Do not underestimate the ridge. Do not assume courage will protect you. The mountain does not simply reject humans, it interrogates, manipulates, tests, and preserves its dominion with patience older than recorded time. I still dream of the ridge at night, each dream a corridor, a canyon, a jagged peak, stretching further than reality should allow. The shadows are waiting, as they have waited for decades, centuries, perhaps millennia. And I am reminded constantly that while we live, the ridge observes, it judges, and it remembers every intrusion, every step, every heartbeat. Some nights, when the wind shifts just right across the Arizona desert, I swear I can hear its whispers even now, carrying through miles of empty sand and rock, a reminder that the silent ridge is not just a place, but an enduring intelligence, eternal, patient, and impossible to flee. To those who may hear this account, heed it well: curiosity alone is dangerous. Preparation, skepticism, and respect are not enough. The ridge will know you, and if it deems your presence a threat, a mistake, or simply entertaining, it may choose to follow, to haunt, to linger, even long after you leave. No human story can fully capture the magnitude of the ridge's consciousness. The deeper truth is ineffable, a sentient mountain, alive with awareness, reacting, resisting, remembering. Arizona's silent ridge is more than stone, more than legend, more than history. It is a force that bends reality, a predator that chooses subtly, an intelligence older than humanity itself. I write this not to frighten, but to record, to warn, and to remember. Those who ignore caution risk becoming part of its memory, a footnote in its timeless history, a shadow in its eternal gaze. And perhaps, in some sense, even now, as I recount these events, it listens, aware, patient, indifferent yet vigilant, the silent ridge of Arizona, the mountain that rejects humans, the entity that watches from jagged peaks, waiting for the next curiosity to trespass, feeding on fear, and remembering every step we dared take in its presence, preserving its dominion for eternity, a force older than our world, alive, aware, eternal, relentless, watching, waiting, unyielding, the mountain that refuses to be understood, the mountain that does not forgive, the mountain that judges silently, with jagged teeth of stone, and eyes in shadow, and a memory that stretches beyond time, and a presence that cannot be escaped, and a consciousness that consumes and observes, and a power that is beyond comprehension, and a force that marks all who survive, and a silence that terrifies, and a watchful patience that never ends, and a knowledge that we are not alone, and a history written in fear, in stone, in whispers, in echoes, in memories of those who dared to approach, in the cries of those who were consumed, in the shadows that linger in the mind, in the darkness that cannot be escaped, in the wind that carries voices from the peaks, in the sand that remembers our footsteps, in the jagged cliffs that shift and move, in the shadows that watch, in the silence that screams, in the ridge that rejects, in the mountain that judges, in the Arizona desert, eternal, alive, conscious, relentless, terrifying, unyielding, immortal, patient, the silent ridge of Arizona, the mountain that rejects humans, forever. Thank you so much for watching the entire video. And to get more videos like this, please like and subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell icon beside it. Thank you.